We often talk on this show about what it means to be smart but stuck, to have a vision for a different life but feel trapped by the system. What if you actually broke free? What if you actually walked away to feel from a comfortable, successful career, packed your family up, and moved to a place where the system was completely broken, all in the name of a mission? My guests have done exactly that. Today, we're talking to Robbie Combmes and Kyle Sumrow, the founders of Tech My School. These are not your typical educators. With a combined 40 years of experience teaching in elite international schools across 4 continents, they have seen world-class education. But when they landed in Puerto Rico, they found something else entirely: an educational system in crisis, where American students were being left behind in classrooms with little technology and even less hope. So Robbie did something radical. He took his life savings, what he calls his boat money, and instead of buying a ticket to a comfortable life, he bought a ticket to a fight. And he and Kyle launched a nonprofit, Rebellion Against the Educational Status Quo. This isn't a story about charity. It's a story about disruption. It's about unconventional entrepreneurship, challenging a broken system from the inside out, and what it truly means to put everything on the line for a cause you believe in. Ready to be inspired and maybe a little uncomfortable as we dive into a story that happens when 2 people decide they've had enough of the way things are. Kyle and Robbie, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us on.
Before we dive into Tech My School, I want to set the stage. You've both had this incredible background with 40 years in education. Can you share an experience from your time abroad, maybe one from the elite side and one from the underfunded side, to showcase to the audience what you saw?
Sure. I'll start. So I started my career in education working in underprivileged schools in Hawaii and San Diego. So I spent 6 years in the lowest performing, poorest schools in the nation, or so I thought. And what I saw was schools that had great teachers. I saw schools that had ample supplies and those kinds of things. They were supported in many ways, but the social economic struggle outside of the school was the big kind of deciding factor. Kids in those inner city schools had a tough time seeing a vision of the purpose of school other than being forced to be there, feeling like they felt more oppressed than served. And as educators, we had to spend a lot of time, I'm not going to say babysitting, but trying to get them to comply with school regulations and just the process of school, sitting down, raising your hand, doing your homework, all those kinds of things that doesn't really allow teachers to teach. Now, conversely, working in some of the top American international diplomat schools, even better facilities, even more resources, and a majority of the students came ready, prepared to learn. It made our job very easy because the kids felt like they wanted to be there. They knew the purpose and the point of school. They had parents who pushed them to do well in your class. They respected you as a teacher. And so in some sense, it was a lot easier. But yeah, the big contrast really with the factors and the pieces of a child's life entering your classroom compared to the schools themselves. I would say that's the biggest difference for me, was just that those outside forces on a child's life that made all the difference in the contrast between these 2 places.
Yeah, I would, I guess, piggyback on that too and say that Robbie touches on a really important point, and we talk about this literally every day, which is the idea of mindset. So mindset is the most important piece. And for a whole litany of reasons, the mindset in a place where you go is very variable, right? So for me, I guess, working in places, just as Robbie described, both in the States and abroad, when people bring in a mindset where they understand the reasons for being there, and I would say they have a future in mind, and the future always involves their upskilling, their learning in order to get to a place. It's like in education, we talk about backwards design. You figure out where you're going, right? And then it helps you to chart your path to get there. So there was a quote, I can't remember who said it, but something like, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And I think that's a lot of the difference of what we see is just from 30,000 feet. When you zoom out, all things aside, just the mindset is a huge deal. And I would say this is probably a good segue into what we do now. And so Robbie being on the ground in Puerto Rico, one of the issues with the schools there, they're not like the inner city struggles that he described. They have some things in common, but they're basically in a position where they have really strong family structures. They have lower divorce rates. They have the kids come and I would say would be ready to learn, but it's the system itself that's really holding them back rather than them not being able to leverage the system that's already in place. So it's flipped on its head in a lot of ways. Would you say that's true, Robbie? Is that?
Yeah. So we started a nonprofit called Tech My School, and it was for that reason. We came here to vacation. We came here to relax. I came here to write a book and really just take a sabbatical year after COVID. And I saw these schools. I put my own kids in the school. Found a school where you have great families, you have great kids, everyone's there ready to learn, but the school systems themselves are so underfunded, underserved, broken, whatever adjective you want to use, that it compelled me to serve. It compelled me to get up and do something about it because it's just so grossly underperforming compared to other schools in the United States. For those who don't know, Puerto Rico is a part of the United States. Everyone here is an American citizen. You can live and move freely from Puerto Rico to Arizona or New York or Texas, both ways. So there's no visa process. It's not a different currency. It's exactly the same country. The only big difference is that you can't vote for the United States presidency here in Puerto Rico. You can vote for who's going to represent each party. But other than that, and the language here is Spanish as a predominant language, but people speak both English and Spanish. But really, they're all American kids, and I'm not Puerto Rican. I just moved here as someone who just came to enjoy the beach for a year, and I just saw this injustice and saw kids getting a raw deal. And so I wanted to help those kids.
In terms of what you saw, is it just like a lack of technology, or is it lack of teachers, or is it a lack of, what are they lacking most American schools have by default?
Yeah, so it's everything. So everything from the facilities themselves. So there's the eye test. I was working in Africa before I came here. Really, there was so much closeness between Africa, the schools I was working with in Nigeria, and Puerto Rico. And that was super shocking because American schools shouldn't look like Nigeria. Secondly, you're having a conversation with the 17-year-old kids, seniors in high school getting ready to graduate. And when you look at the test scores of Puerto Rico, you can look them up yourself. You look at the PISA scores. Puerto Rico is the worst performer literally in the world. And so you're talking to these kids, 17 years old, and they're polite, super nice, kind. They read it like a fourth or fifth grade level. They've never used a computer before. They barely speak English. And you're thinking like, compare that 17-year-old kid versus a kid who went to my high school in San Diego. Vastly different. And these are good kids. These are kids who are ready to learn, who did all the things and really compliant. And yeah, it's just insane to think starting out a life where you're just so far behind, even though you did the right thing in this country.
Yeah. I've heard Robbie, just to dovetail on that, I've heard Robbie say like he's never met a kid in the American public system who really wanted to learn and succeed who didn't, right? If they have that desire and that drive, the system is there. Even in the worst spots in the US, the system is there for them to be able to grab a hold of the rope and pull themselves out. But that's the fundamental difference in Puerto Rico, is that the system itself does not support the kids who want to get out. So that's where we come in, is that we are there to help with the structural pieces. And by structure, I don't just mean like the physical frameworks and the buildings and things like that. Like you asked about the differences. Another big difference is teacher training. If you try and imagine a situation where you've got a country where the government has put regulations on what you can spend the United States federal money on that comes in for education. They're funded the same way that the states are funded, but they have regulations that you can't spend money on facilities and you can't spend money on teacher salaries. And from what you just said, that the kids are behind, so far behind, they have a huge brain drain problem. People who do well there and go to college and get a degree and would become teachers, they end up moving to Miami, or they move to Houston, or they go to places where like a bilingual teacher is worth a lot of money. They can come to the States and earn a $60,000 starting salary in a lot of these places, or stay in Puerto Rico and make $18,000 a year. Like that's a no brainer. So a lot of that brain drain problem is real there. So they've passed another law that you don't even need a college degree in order to teach now. So you have kids who are 18 years old who barely got through high school, who are reading at a 6th grade level. They're now in front of a classroom. They're the ones who are teaching the next generation. That is a downward spiral. So that's the motivator for us to kind of get these systems in place.
Why is it? So this might be something I'm lacking in knowledge of. Why is it that being part of the United States, it doesn't have the same kind of structure? It's like, I understand that they'll get money from the federal government, but is it a province or is it a territory? I don't know.
It's called a protectorate.
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially, Puerto Rico is exactly like Hawaii. So Hawaii and Puerto Rico are on the opposite sides of the continental U.S. Are both islands, are both military strategic outpoints. Hawaii for Pacific and Asia, and then Puerto Rico being all the Caribbean and potentially Europe. The big difference is that the Japanese bombed Hawaii, and so we felt bad and made it a state. The Germans didn't bomb Puerto Rico, so we just kept it in this territory status. And the United States uses Puerto Rico kind of as this military, recruiting local people to fight the army, using some of the islands to bomb and practice they have a dark history with that, using islands, and some residents have died. And there's a lot of like shady things in terms of like Puerto Rico's past that have contributed to this. I'm not going to say negative history, but there's just this darker past where a lot of local Puerto Ricans feel a lot of resentment towards the mainland U.S. They feel like they want an independent country. They feel like we're different than Americans, and we're different than these people who come to our island and who are living here for tax breaks, or who are living here to take advantage of our beautiful nature, but they haven't felt the struggles that we've felt. And so there is an us versus them mentality. Not everybody. There is a large proportion of people who've voted. They've actually done this vote many times. Do you want to become part of the United States as a state? And ultimately, they've always voted, yes, we do want to be part of the states. But that vote is ceremonial. Yeah. The Congress and the U.S. government doesn't recognize it. And so if they made Puerto Rico a state, that would mean 2 senators would come out of Puerto Rico, the same way California, the same way Wyoming or whatever. And so there is this sensitivity to adding new states to the mix of people in Senate and Congress, because then there would be a power shift. And though Puerto Rico is very conservative in many ways, the most religious place in America, they're actually very much more on the left. So it would be a deep blue state. And the Republicans don't really want Puerto Rico to be a state, because then it's okay, we're getting 2 more Democrat votes that we'd have to go against. And then also in the history of the United States, they've always brought in 2 states for every time they've added states to the union, right? They don't just add 1. So they would need a second.
Because of the flags. Where do we put the stars?
They'd be adding in 2 blue states and no red states. So because of that, they've been in this weird limbo status where they can live and move and travel, but they also have this independence. They have their own culture, because Puerto Rico is part of Spain for 500 years or 400 years. Like Puerto Rico, San Juan, our city here, it's older than pretty much any state or city in America. It's like the oldest city in America, but it was part of Spain for 400 years. And then during the Spanish-American War, we just took it over as like a prize for winning that. And so it just transferred from being Spanish to American. And it's just been a continuation, but there's just these deep roots from Spain, these deep Spanish heritage here. And so there is this almost love and adherence to Spain for many people, even though Spain used Puerto Rico strictly as a territory, or not a territory, but a colony. You're our colony. We're going to use all your natural resources for our benefit. The local people here still have this like love, and they give them kind of a pass. Oh, Spain was so great. But America, who's actually giving money and trying to support Puerto Rico. And if you look at the financial difference of how much we spend on Puerto Rico versus how much we take from Puerto Rico, it's far greater that we spend than what we take, which is why there's been rhetoric by our beloved leader, Trump, that we should sell Puerto Rico because it's a money loser for us. Sell Puerto Rico like it's a property. We're losing all this money on it. But still there's like this, again, it's kind of resentment and there's this local push. So honestly, I don't know what's going to happen with Puerto Rico, whether it's going to be a territory forever, it's going to become its own country, or become part of the States, a singing state and a star on the flag. Not really sure what's going to happen. I just know these kids here locally don't get to determine or choose that. And so for these external reasons, they're the ones paying the price, and we're trying to do everything we can to support them.
Yes, and always sorry, I was just going to say your question about like why differences persist. The issue, like, so in the United States, the way that education is funded is that the federal government pays for education, but they don't do it directly. They don't have they're more lean, right? They send that money to the states, and the states have like really strict regulations on how that money gets distributed to their counties and then their school districts and what it can be spent on. Because Puerto Rico is not a state, they don't have they're not on the same regulations. So when the money comes in, the United States in some ways has just taken their hands off the wheel and said, look, you're a strategic military position. Yeah, sorry about all the negativity, the whatever happened over all these years. And that money, you guys get to decide what you do with it. And that leaves a lot of room for nefarious things to happen from their side, which is to say that Robbie's talking about them voting for statehood. They are not a monolith. The people who are enriching themselves from the federal money coming in, they don't want anything to change. The status quo needs to stay the same for them to keep up the grift. So I think that's a big part of it, is that they just don't have the regulatory oversight that the states have when it comes to education.
It does seem that's a common theme across every country now, though, is just nobody wants to have a big change that we really need to go through. Everybody feels that. Know that for a fact. But the fact that the children are the ones that have to suffer for it, especially when they want to learn, they want to understand, they want to have a better education, is fair on their side. Also, you made me feel really good about not becoming the 51st state, because we would be very left.
That's right. And to add a third language would also be an interesting point for us.
So I want to get back to Robbie. Like, you spent your boat money to do this. Can you explain why it was?
Yeah. So basically, after working internationally, and we're good little savers, my wife and I, we saved up some money. We came to Puerto Rico to fish and to relax and write a book. And I wanted to have this money saved up for a book. I bought the truck. So I got the truck. I'm ready for the towing capacity. I'm looking into towing and all that kind of stuff to make sure it's legit. And then I put the kids in schools, and I was stunned by just how poorly it was run, how poorly the system was structured. That it was, again, I just felt like it was so bad. If it was at Mississippi level, I would have the boat, and I wouldn't be in Puerto Rico. I would be gone. I would have moved back to my international teaching lifestyle, which I loved, but it was just so poor and so bad that I was like, I can't sit here and do nothing. You know what I mean? It's almost like if a doctor goes on vacation and then he's walking along the side of the road and someone's like bleeding out. They're not going to just keep walking. They're going to stop and try to help them out. And so, I started with one school and said, hey, random director, I know I'm new here, but I just noticed you guys don't have any library. There's no library here. There are no public libraries in Puerto Rico. The classrooms have very few books, maybe 3 or 5 or something. How are you guys reading? What kind of reading programs do you guys do? How are my kids going to learn when they're out to school? And they were, we have these books in our classroom, and that's kind of it. And I was like, would you guys like a digital library? I know this program, it's called Get Epic, 40,000 books. They can get read to me. There's all different levels, all different languages. Would you like that? And she was like, sure. I'm like, great. What's your email? And she's, catlady69@gmail. And so I'm like, that's not good. What's your real email? What's your school email? And she's like, our school doesn't have a school email. We all use our personal emails when communicating with kids. And I'm just looking over, there's like this 40-year-old man teacher. And I'm like, this is not good for a 40-year-old guy to be using his personal email to be emailing his 13-year-old girl students. So I'm like, all right, you guys need Google for Education. So let me get that for you guys. Because I had gone from teacher to teacher trainer to CTO of schools. Kyle and I are both tech directors of schools. And so I put that kind of hat on, and I was just going through the checklist of what do you have, what do you not have. And so as I started to peel the layers of the onion, I'm like, wow, you guys really don't have anything. The eye test was glaring, but as you uncover underneath the rocks, you're like, it's really bad in here. So I started down that path of becoming that school's tech director of, okay, let's get you guys these systems in place. Let you guys these digital library and these other learning management systems, student information system, and all that requires money in these schools. So Puerto Rico in itself has about half of the schools are public and half the schools are private, which is weird because usually there's far less private than public in most places. And if you go to a private school, so it's a privilege. It's something that wealthy kids go to.
It's 10% on the mainland, 10% private schools.
Yeah. And so here in Puerto Rico, it's a necessity that you go to a private school. Why do I say that? Because there's such a shortage of teachers here publicly that, for example, if your teacher gets sick, they'll call you and say, hey, your teacher's sick today, come pick your kid up. So if you have a job, you can't work because you have to keep picking up your kid. And sometimes teachers will take a month off for vacation, or they're sick, or they've accumulated a certain amount of days. And so they'll take the time off. So your kid just doesn't go to school that month. And so really you can't do it unless you're at home all the time. And there's also a very high welfare population here. So I'm not sure if this is the exact number, but I've heard it's around 47%, which makes sense because if there's about half that are public and half that are private, half the people who are on welfare, they can have their kids come home because they're not working, right? And so these schools that are private, I say private loosely, the tuition's about $200 per month per kid, and that includes food. So your kid's getting fed and watched 5 days a week for the month for $200. And when it's that low income coming in for a school, they can only really afford electricity, a concrete slab, a fan, and a chalkboard, and that's basically it, which is why Kyle was saying the teachers here make on average between $1,500 and $1,800 a month. However, it is America. It is an island. There is the Jones Act. You can look that up, but basically everything has to be shipped in. So 90% of everything that comes into Puerto Rico isn't from here. And so it's expensive. Like milk is $8. So it's like prices are still very high. It's still America, but it's like Hawaii in that sense of being very expensive. And so these teachers who are working here, most of them wouldn't be that same kind of teacher that you'd find in New York or in Florida or in Texas, because they're just like you asked, they don't have the same story. Like you're asking these teachers, why did you become a teacher? Teachers on the mainland would say, oh, I love kids. And I had this great teacher growing up and I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So I studied really hard and I got all these degrees and I came back to be a teacher and became a teacher. And I'm not saying those people don't exist here, but it's very common to find people here who are teachers who are like, I was working at the gas station. I got tired of working late. We got robbed. So I just wanted a day job. So I just got a job at a school. Or I was going to school in community college. I didn't really like it. So I just became a teacher. It's just, you get these answers that are just shocking. And again, this isn't everyone, but still they do exist here. And so with that, you get, again, half public, half private. And for me, I was just like, got to do something. I've got this boat money. And I started to dip into that boat money to pay for these services for these schools. And then eventually the teachers, thankfully for them, they were really appreciative of the work that we did. We came in partnership. I wasn't coming in as this person like, I know better than you and do what I say. It was very much where are you guys out and how can I help? And it was through a partnership with these schools that other teachers started reaching out to their friends and being like, hey, there's these guys, these gringos, they're helping with our school. They're giving us computers. They're giving us software. They're giving us training. I went from new parent to training all staff the first month of being in a school, which is insane. And they asked if we could help their school. And I said, sure, we'll take you guys on. And pretty soon we had 4 schools. And yeah, that boat money was used to help in schools. And I came to peace with it. I was like, I came to serve myself, but instead I ended up serving other people. And I'm just happy to do it. And that's what I call my nonprofit, my boat, in the sense that the money that I was supposed to go to this is going to that. And
it's a good story because it really showcases that you built up a life for yourself that you wanted, and then you realized that you had a greater purpose. It really showcases you're human and that you're genuinely one of those people who saw something and needed it to change. And I feel like you both probably feel better about where you are, right?
Yeah, we tell kids as educators, there's these core values that are embedded in schools. Be a risk taker, serve others, be this do-gooder when you go out in the world. And no offense to my fellow educators out there, but we're very risk averse people. We went to school because we were forced to go to school as kids. And then we went to college because that's what you do. And then once we got out of college, we're like, let's go back to school. You know what I mean? We didn't really step out there and jump giant leaps or these big risks. We just stayed in the system that raised us. And so I was put in this position where I see the problem. It's right in front of your face. It's like a house being on fire. And it's like, we tell everyone to be brave and to go do something. But it's like, am I actually going to be the person who's brave and that goes and does something? And yeah, I mean, that I had to ask myself that question. Have I just been lying to kids all these years, telling them to do the right thing and to be entrepreneurial and do all these brave and amazing feats to make the world a better place? But I'm not going to do it myself. And Kyle, I started this thing, but Kyle and we'd worked together, been buddies for years, for over 10 years. And I actually started by working for Kyle in Saudi Arabia, of all places. But Kyle was presented with this same opportunity. He was in, I'll let Kyle tell the story, but he was in this very wealthy school and a great job, and he had to take a leap. So Kyle, why don't you jump into that about how you joined Tech My School?
Yeah, I was working for a private school here in Houston, a really fantastic school, high achieving, like kind of a dream job for somebody who was in my position. I was the director of technology and innovation. And I had a long leash, I would say, and was trusted to be building programs and doing a lot of really great things there. And I say those things only to show that I didn't leave because I didn't like my job. I actually loved it. But one of the things that happened like right after COVID, as Robbie was getting this thing started, I'm in this school that is a school of means, right? The students come mostly, not all, but mostly come from very well-to-do families, and the school is well-resourced. And we were in a weird position at the end of COVID where we were replacing, we had a couple of computer labs and we were replacing these old iMacs with new iMacs. And I was sitting on a whole truckload of these computers. And this was like this would have been in 2020. So it was like right in the throes of the pandemic. This is before Robbie had started Tech My School. And I called around to all these different recyclers of computers. Hey, where can we put these to schools? So I called a ton of people and no one would take the computers. I'm like, they still work. We're not replacing them because they're broken. We're replacing them because they're old. And it made me feel something that I do not like feeling. It's the same as like throwing food out from the refrigerator. It doesn't sit well with me. So what that led me to is then Robbie's like, hey, we're doing this thing now. And I'm like, hey, next year, what if we just got whatever old computers we have? What if they ended up with you guys and you can repurpose them in schools? And so we started doing that. The first year was a few computers. And then after that, we were like, this is great. Let's just keep giving them more and more stuff. So over the course of 4 years, we were giving them all of our old computers that were going in. And I think at the beginning, that was really like the bulk of the computers that Robbie had to put into the schools he was working with. We did this for a couple of years and Robbie was like, you know what, you guys this is so generous. Why don't we have your kids? Why don't you get a group of your high school kids to come down and work with some of our schools and do it? So Robbie and I grew up like as educators in having these programs called Week Without Walls, where we would take the kids on trips mostly to developing countries, places where the kids could serve. They would build houses. They would do all the things that you would think of that kids would do to serve in that environment. Those programs were transformational for kids. When you have kids who grow up with a silver spoon in their hand, getting them to see what poverty looks like and what the people's lives are like, and really humanizing poverty and this is just seeing the rest of the world. It's so good for them, so impactful. I thought, you know what, like these kids could use that too. So we put together a trip where they came down and they came down and helped run coding programs for kids, and they were doing teacher training and they did all kinds of stuff down there, but they also had fun. They got to go ziplining in the rainforest and do some really fun stuff too. It was I would say it was a huge success. And those kids actually stayed really close. It was like 14 or 15 kids that came. They were a really tight little pod after that for the next 2 years of high school, just because of the bonds that they built. Going through this process of seeing what his organization was doing to impact not only the kids that he was directly serving there, but also the ways in which we could be serving kids who are like our next generation of leaders here. I loved it. I was totally sold. And Robbie actually came out the next year. And one of the things we do in schools when we first started engagement with the schools, we go through this assessment process where we run them through a self-study where, like he said, it's not us coming in telling them what they should be doing. It's us coming in and just asking hard questions and helping them to clarify their vision. What is it that you want? How do you see technology helping to get you to your goals. And that's a lens that we look at it through. He came and did that assessment at my school. And I was so blown away by all the things we learned through that process. Even like I said, this is one of the highest achieving schools in the state of Texas, 30 million people. That is a big deal. The school is really good. And for him to be able to come in and say, hey, did you ever think about these different ways of looking at how you think about technology and how it can support learning? I was totally in. I was like, you know what? Let's do it. I saw that this was an opportunity for me to really scale that impact that I already had. And I loved it. And it's challenging because I don't know if you've seen that old commercial where the guys are building an airplane while they're flying it. That in some ways, that's what this has been for us, because every time we get a few more dollars donated or we sell some more services and we're like, okay, what's the next sort of piece of transformation that we can undergo? How can we adapt to what we're doing? And Robbie said, we tell kids to be willing to take risks, and you want to be calculated in the risks that you take. But yeah, this was a really good risk, I think, because what was the worst case scenario? We spend a few years helping kids and then we go back to our careers being successful at what we're already doing. And I don't know, at this point, we have to decide if we could ever go back to a sort of a standard education career with what we've gotten to do over the last few years.
That's fair. And I do want to touch on a point that you made there about the old technology. I worked in an IT company for a little bit, and that's all we did with our old tech. It wasn't bad. It didn't do anything. It was just getting replaced, and it just went to the trash pile. Half of my office is that trash pile, because you just take what's available and everything still works. Like 10-year-old equipment is still really good, but
Yeah,
to be able to give that.
Yeah, we've been able to reach out to a number of partners, and that's something that when I'm out there in the field networking with people, because half the job is serving the schools, and then half the job is also raising money, capital, interest for the mission. And we've had some great partners in just random companies, random fields, because they do have some technology they can donate or some other service logistics. They can help with the shipping. There's just a lot of different ways to support. And we've been grateful enough to have been able to, and lucky enough to have been able to get over 1,000 devices that we've been able to donate to schools across Puerto Rico, from anything from interactive flat panels to computers, iPads, cameras. Yesterday we were in a school building a podcast studio. One of the schools, we had a Week Without Walls group come in from New York. These kids from New York came in. We demoed this library space. We took out all the old junk, cleaned it out. We painted the walls, and then we actually put up walls and made it 2 spaces. One of the spaces is now going to be a media lab, where we painted all the walls green, and we've got a desk, computers, so they can make podcasting and videos and those kind of things. And then the other side of it is kind of a modern 21st century library space where there's 3D printers, computers, and some books and some kind of nooks and stuff like that. So that was my yesterday. But yeah, that stuff came in from most of the stuff we brought. We bought the furniture from IKEA, but a lot of the devices either came through Kyle facilitating and aggregating it, or local donors here, meeting with people and stuff like that, and just put it all together. We're still in the process, but it's going to be great when it's done.
So this is my appeal to all of your listeners. So if you work for a company that has old devices, we would love to take them on. We never say no. One thing I would say is that when you said something that about the old equipment is not bad, it's just older, right? Try and imagine you are in an office space where you have this huge benefit that you live in a place where I work for a company that can afford to just replace these things. A lot of the schools we work with have literally never had a single computer in them. So what we're bringing to them, that it is fun to play Santa Claus, but it's actually the least important part of our job. When we go in and we bring equipment in, they're super excited about the equipment, but the price tag for that is that we actually come in and teach you how to use it. And what that is, the technology is just a lens to look at teaching and learning. So we're coming in, when at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about how the teachers are underpaid, they're undertrained, they're undereducated in a lot of cases. That is what we are, that collegiate sort of program that all of us sort of Western educators went through these programs to learn how to become teachers. That's what we provide to them, right? Where we come in and we say, hey, we realize that you didn't get some of these classes on the basics of how to backwards design lesson planning, and let's do observations. Let's talk about pedagogy. Let's talk about the ways that kids learn best and the ways they don't. And so it has given us a platform. We've joked that sometimes that the company could be called Teach My School, because what we're really there to do is we give out tech, and technology is this lever that can amplify this process and make it more efficient. But we're there full stop. We are there to see what we can do for each individual school, and the needs are a little bit different at every school, but what can we do for you to help raise the tide? Let's pick up all the boats around us.
And just to question, like, what is the cost, like the average cost of this for a school?
Yeah, so we have an annual report that we do at the end of the year for each school. And it goes through, we do a plan at the beginning of the year. So we audit the school and then we create this plan that sits on a 4-stage roadmap. So some schools can push through this roadmap faster than others. Like maybe one school will be on stage 1 for 3 years. Other schools might skip a stage. It just depends on their appetite for learning and growing. But at the end of every year, we then give them an end of year report. And this end of year report breaks down all of the work, all the professional developments, all the classroom observations, as well as all the donations. And so we average between 60,000 and 80,000 per school that we donate in terms of goods and services, from trainings to computers to software. Software is actually more expensive than the hardware. Like we'll spend 25,000 on a software and no one will see it. So we're trying to appeal to our donors like, hey, we went and just trained this staff how to use this awesome software that's going to totally transform the way they teach. And they're like, whatever. But then I'm like, hey, I gave 3 iPads to some kids. They're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And like the iPads cost $200 each. And the software was like 20,000. So yeah, you got to play both fields, but we break it down for every single school. And so we have this kind of aggregate data, and some schools get more than others depending on need. And there are schools like we'll donate 100 computers or more. We've donated 300 computers to a school. And so it could be a lot more than 50,000 on that average, but on average it's between 60 and 80, depending on the school.
Well, we've got a team there too that are all Puerto Rican teachers who we've gotten to train into our framework and our system. And that's another piece of what we end up spending, is just to pay salaries of our trainers. So we have a whole team of tech integrators that are on the ground, and that's literally what they do all day, every day, is go from school to school to run coding programs and training programs for teachers and like software training, hardware setup. They do everything, and we couldn't do it without them. But it's just like any company. We're a nonprofit, but just like any company, the human capital is always your biggest spend. Just paying people to do the work is always the most expensive piece.
Yeah, I'd like to add 2 quick things, and thanks for bringing that up, Kyle. The first one is, one of the great things about having these integrators is that we feel pretty good about paying them a real salary, not paying them pennies. So we pay them like an integrator should be paid, like that you'd find in the States. And what's cool is we're able to cherry pick of the best on the island and to have them be part of Tech My School and have them work for us. And the second thing I forgot as I was talking, so it'll come back to me.
No worry.
Oh, Robbie, maybe this is a good segue to maybe tell them about the flock leader program. And that's like a huge part of our training.
That was actually what I was going into next. So
yeah, one of the things that we try to do is we try to keep it sustainable by teaching ourselves out of job. And I remember that second point. These trainings that we talked about, as a tech director or even a principal, you may get tech directors in particularly. We'll probably do like between 1 and 3 all staff professional developments per year. Like we're chomping at the bit to get in front of teachers to showcase all these different things, but we get about 1 to 3 per year. And the rest of the time we have to fill with other things. We're in schools 200 times a school year. So we're in multiple schools every single day. And an integrator will do 5 professional developments a week or 7 professional developments a week. So you're doing so many. And so it's like you're growing 10 years of experience in one. So that was the other thing I wanted to add, just to put in context. Yeah. Educators who are listening, we're doing so many professional developments back to back. So we've gotten pretty good at it. And then one of the things that we do when we go into a school, if we're this outside entity, they can look at us. It's a Friday afternoon. They want to go home. The principal says, hey, these guys are going to come in and train you about some tool called Snorkel. You're thinking like, I just want to get out of here. So we always come in with food and energy and drinks, and we try to make it fun. But another thing we do is at every school, we actually have this program called the Flock Leader Program. Why flock? Because we're the Puerto Rican green parrot. That's our logo. And birds fly in that V formation. So that the front bird is called the Flock Leader. I thought there was a cooler scientific name. But anyways, the Flock Leaders is where we actually choose one person on staff to be part of our team. So we pay them a stipend every month, and we train them to come up and train with us. So when we come up to present, we're not this outside entity, we're a partnership, and they see their colleague come up and they're at least going to show respect to the colleague, if not us. And so we're training together. And so what it does for that flock leaders, it gives them a step into leadership. And we've had many flock leaders go on from being just a random teacher who nervously raised their hand to becoming a principal, becoming a school leader, etc. We've actually hired flock leaders to join our team years later after they've done it a couple of years. And so there's the training component when we come in and train them, but there's also this PLC that we create, professional learning community, where every month we take all the flock leaders from all the different schools and we have them meet in one place. We'll go to Dave and Buster's or bowling or something like that, something team building. We'll have some fun. We'll play some arcade or whatever. And then we rent one of those rooms and get food. And then we do this kind of targeted learning with these emerging teachers. And we get them to network and meet each other. And so they have people outside of their school that they can talk to about problems or issues that they're having. We challenge them to work together and do these like cross school activities. And then ultimately what we're trying to do is get them to become better than themselves through this network that they now have. And then in turn, that turns them into these quasi administrators on campus. And so even though we're not there for the entire month, teachers can go to someone and ask them questions about learning, teaching, technology, whatever, even though we're not there. And then when we're coming into a campus, we can ask them like, hey, what's going on with the school? What's the dirt? And they'd be like, oh, this teacher had this problem and this administrator said this and someone's dog died or whatever. And so we can come in with we're not going into it blind. We can be sensitive to the culture of the school and call out birthdays and, hey, want to give a shout out to Andrea's birthday. We could do things that normally you wouldn't be able to do if you're coming into it as just this outside entity. So that's kind of the flock leader program in a nutshell.
I like how you guys make it feel like family.
Yeah, and that's really the secret sauce in teaching. There's been a ton of research done over the last 20 years on like, how do you get to the highest levels of efficacy with teaching? And John Hattie has famous research where he went through this long study, like 20 years of tens of thousands of students at all these schools. And they looked at 100 different ways that we intervene in a classroom setting. And then he was basically trying to give a rating to each one of those. What moves the needle in academics? And it turns out the ones that move the needle the most are some of the most like counterintuitive. And they're not the direct interactions with students. They actually have to do with the ways that the teachers relate to each other. So they call it collective teacher efficacy, which is essentially like teachers having this shared belief that every kid in the building can grow. And when they all share that, it really launches the school in terms of what's possible. Teacher quality is another really important one. There's a lot of them, but they're not just if you teach the kids this thing in this way. It's actually, you got to zoom out. It's an organizational structure and leadership. It's culture. Like culture actually guides efficacy. And that it's really interesting for your listeners who are not educators. There's probably a lot of them, but one of the things that teachers do is have a PLC, right? That the professional learning community is a really important part of growing professionally. And what do we do? What is a PLC? It's people who have a similar role, similar job, talking about what's working. That's the whole thing is like, what's working for you? Look, I had a great idea. I thought it was, I did this thing. It didn't work. And somebody else can chime in and say, hey, what if you tweaked this one thing? And what we're talking about essentially here is like continuing education for educators that doesn't ever stop. And that's how we have to operate to stay at the top of our game as educators. We have to have other people's input and then we have to be able to share and reflect. Like reflective practice is really important in education. And I say that because one of the ways that we've helped to build that, and by the way, Robbie started this with these teachers because when we go in and assess like schools programs, there's an entire of the 3 segments that we look at. One of them is professional learning. We look at how do adults learn in your building? And so we're there to help increase the capacity of the staff. After doing that, there's another version of professional learning communities that are like conferences. Conferences are really helpful because you get then professionals who are outside of this PLC, right? Who come in and I don't have to explain what conference is, but you're essentially getting that same teaching in like a corporate setting. It's in person. There's a lot of opportunities for breakout groups and people to like hear a message and then wrestle with it together in small groups. That is a really important part of professional learning too. And so Robbie started a conference. It is the top conference, educators conference in the Caribbean. And so we get people from all the Caribbean islands coming in to be part of this conference. We get amazing speakers to come in and we let the teachers who are at the schools that we serve, they come for free. So that's another way that we spend the money, the donor money that comes in is that we're able to host a real professional learning conference for them. And the teachers who come, they come one time and they're like, I'm coming every year. Like, this is transformational for them. They've never had access to something like this before. So what we're really trying to do is elevate the profession on the island. And it's really catching on like wildfire, because once you get a taste of learning about your craft and realizing like, oh, I'm not in this alone, there's no going back. You can't go back to just a siloed environment where you're teaching by yourself. That's what we do. We're a collective, and we're better together.
I emphasize that with this podcast. I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't learned that. Better together, learning from everybody else, trying to take these messages and give them to as many people as possible. I feel like a lot more professions need that attitude. So we're just coming up on the last 5 minutes. I just want to let you guys plug Tech My School and let the audience know that everything will be in the comments or the descriptions down below for you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so Tech My School, obviously that's where you can start. We have an Instagram where you can see every single day the work that we do, the services we're pretty good at posting every day. So you can, if you want to just get a glance of what does it look like and how are they serving, go to Instagram, follow us there. That's step one. If you want to look more, our website, techmyschool.org. Great. There's lots of stuff on there. If you're interested in the conference, there's a conference tab and has the dates. It's the 10th and 11th of April, 2026 is our next conference. We have George Kuros, Canadian, who's going to be headlining for us. So he's a great educator. Very lucky to have him on board. We also have software. So we have some software that we've developed as well that goes through this process. So if your school needs a technology plan or you need support with that, yes, we help these underserved schools in Puerto Rico, but we also serve schools off island, in the States, internationally. We built plans for international schools and schools in the US, whether they're really high-end, high-achieving schools, middling, public schools, or private schools. We do it all. It's called techplangenie.com. And Kyle also developed software called Relief Roster. And I'll let Kyle speak a little bit more about that, but that's another one you can check out. Yeah. Yeah, Kyle, take it away with Relief Roster. And so check out Tech My School and Tech Plan Genie.
Yeah, all I can say about my software is that is the least sexy piece of software that is highly efficient and really helpful in school. So it's all about helping schools to be able to manage their substitute teaching loads and like how you onboard subs and then how you get them to teachers can report when they're going to be out, and it gives information for what's needed for the sub coming in. And then it has a calendaring system where subs can sign up for different substitute teaching jobs, and it does all this automated emailing and stuff. So it's really great. Don't spend time looking at it if you're like looking for entertainment or excitement in any way. It's a really helpful piece of efficiency upgrade software for schools. But yeah, here's the thing. So if you're listening to this, you may say, I'm not an educator. This doesn't really apply to me. But one thing that we all have is that we know people who are going to school, who work at schools, who were around schools. Everybody's got a dotted line somehow to the schools in their area. And what I would say is our ask, I guess, is one of awareness. Because we're a nonprofit in the US, we act as a philanthropic arm for a lot of software companies that provide software to schools. So we get software for way cheaper than you can get it if you go to those providers. And we have so many of them that we work with. I would say reach out if you have school friends or somebody leads a school or is a teacher. Have them check us out and just reach out, and we're happy to just shoot them an email and say, hey, look, click here and go look at our catalog of stuff that we offer. So I think the other ask would be if you work for a company and if you're looking for a place to recycle your old computers, iPads, really anything that can go into a school. We take books, we take furniture, we take a lot of stuff. Anyway, just hit us up. Let us know, info@techmyschool.org. You can just email us if you feel like you may want to partner with us. So
perfect.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us on.
Thank you for coming. And sorry, Robbie, do you want to?
I was just saying, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you both very much for coming on. And to my audience out there, I hope you enjoyed this show. All of that information will be down in the description below. And to everybody out there, stay weird.